The wind carried a chilling scent across the desolate wilderness. All I could see was withered grass stretching toward the horizon under a gray, lifeless sky. There wasn't a soul in sight. I stood there, frozen, staring at my surroundings in a daze. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. One minute I was a modern person from the 21st century, and the next, I had crossed over into the body of a strange woman. Fragmented memories suddenly flooded my mind like a crashing wave. This was the Great Tang Dynasty. It was a world where demons roamed the earth, feasting on human flesh and plunging the land into chaos. I looked down at my hands. They were thin and weak. Why was a fragile woman like me abandoned in the middle of this godforsaken wasteland? I forced myself to stand up and looked around. The ground was a graveyard. Bodies were scattered everywhere. Most wore the same dusty, gray robes I was wearing. Others wore black uniforms with crimson cloud patterns embroidered on the collars and sleeves. Then, my eyes hit something that made my breath hitch. Near a massive jagged rock, a gargantuan figure sat slumped. As the silhouette came into focus, my heart hammered against my ribs. It had the body of a man but the head of a tiger. Even in death, the creature radiated a terrifying, savage pressure that made my chest tighten. There was a massive hole in its chest. Black, foul-smelling blood had pooled all over the dirt. A demon. I let out a shaky breath. Thank God it was dead. Movement nearby caught my eye. Another figure was slumped not far from the tiger demon. He wore the black and crimson uniform, a government official. He was half kneeling, leaning heavily on a broken blade stabbed into the mud to keep from collapsing. He was covered in gashes. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, and his chest rose and fell in shallow, weak hitches. He was at the end of his rope. The wind howled through the grass like a mourning cry. Aside from this dying man and myself, there wasn't another living thing in sight. I held my breath and instinctively took a quiet step backward. The man's head turned with agonizing slowness. He looked young, maybe in his early 20s, but his face was deathly pale and his lips were cracked and bloody. He spotted me. "Come here," he rasped. His voice was so hoarse I could barely make out the words. "You say come here, and I'm just supposed to do it?" I thought bitterly. The memories of this body started to sharpen. I was the daughter of a high-ranking official in the capital. My father had been framed for a crime, and the whole family was dragged down with him. I had been stripped of my status and sentenced to internal exile at the border. And this half-dead man? He was the officer escorting the prisoners. He belonged to the Jinma Bureau. In the Great Tang, the mere mention of that name made people turn white. They were the demon hunters, the executioners. When they knocked on your door, it was like a summons from the king of hell. The border was a fate worse than death. If I ran now, I might actually have a chance at a new life. I made up my mind. I turned slowly, preparing to bolt. Whiz. A sharp whistle tore through the air. A jagged piece of a broken blade slammed into the ground just inches from my toes. I froze, cold sweat instantly soaked my back. How was a dying man still that fast? If he had aimed for my head instead of my feet, I'd be just another corpse cooling in the dirt. I took a deep breath, swallowing my frustration. Fine, I'll go over. When you're under someone else's roof, you have to bow your head. I turned around and shuffled toward him like a frightened chick. He looked up, a faint, mocking twitch at the corner of his mouth. He had clearly used the last of his strength for that throw. If I had really run, he couldn't have stopped me, but his bluff worked. "Prop me up," he commanded. Then, as if sensing my hesitation, he added, "I am Pei Chongqing, captain of the Longyu Jinma Bureau." He gasped for air, his eyes locked onto my panicked face. "I know you want to run, but where would you go? A fugitive with no identity papers? Even if you make it to the next town, you'll be caught or killed. Help me, and I'll see to it that your record is cleared. I'll give you your freedom." I rolled my eyes internally. Asterisk great. Another boss feeding me big picture lies. Asterisk. My old boss used to promise me the world while I worked myself to death, and look where that got me, meeting the Grim Reaper ahead of schedule. But he wasn't wrong. Running was a suicide mission. A weak woman alone in a demon-infested wasteland had a 0% survival rate. Besides, who knew what other tricks he had up his sleeve? If I pissed him off, he might just cut me down out of spite. "Fine," I muttered. I stepped forward and reached for his arm. His skin was burning hot, the fever radiating through his clothes. He smelled like a rank mix of old blood and sweat. This side, he gestured with his chin toward his uninjured right arm. I moved to his other side and hauled his arm over my shoulders. He was heavy. The sheer weight of him made me stumble, nearly sending us both face first into the mud. I gritted my teeth, using every ounce of strength I had to hoist him up. He was tall, and with his feet dragging in the dirt, every step was a battle. Where are we going? I panted. South. I didn't waste my breath talking. I focused on dragging this man one agonizing step at a time. But we had only made it a few yards when a strange sound echoed from behind us. Ha ha ha. My blood turned to ice. Beside me, Pei Changqing stiffened. Then came a long, weary sigh. Don't run, a deep voice rumbled. In this wilderness, where could you possibly go? I felt like the universe was playing a sick joke on me. They say the dead don't come back, but nobody told me that applied to demons. My grip failed, and I accidentally let go. Ugh, Pei Changqing groaned as he slammed into the ground. I didn't even apologize. I couldn't. I was staring at the tiger demon. The massive hole in its chest was still there, jagged and gore-streaked, but the creature was standing up. It twisted its thick neck, the bones popping and cracking like dry wood. It looked at us and grinned, baring yellow fangs. Surprised? Did you really think a few low-level guards and one measly captain could kill me? Pei Changqing was shaking. I could feel the terror radiating off him. How was this possible? He had driven his blade straight through the demon's heart. He was a veteran. He didn't miss. But the tiger demon didn't look weakened at all. A horrifying realization dawned on Pei Changqing. This wasn't a normal demon. It was on the verge of the bone resonance realm. When a demon reached that level, they gained supernatural talents. Some could regenerate from a single drop of blood, others could weave illusions so real they could kill. But why was a high-level demon here? Why would it ambush a group of pathetic exiles? It clearly didn't care about the prisoners. In a flash of desperation, Pei Changqing forced his remaining energy to circulate. He didn't care if the strain crippled him for life. He had to move. Pei Changqing didn't give up. He lunged forward, grabbing a fallen blade from the dirt. He let out a desperate roar and swung the heavy iron toward the tiger demon's throat. The demon didn't even bother to dodge. It simply raised a massive leg and kicked out with blinding speed. There was a sickening thud. Pei Changqing's body flew backward, crashing into the dirt right at my feet. His sword clattered away, spinning into the tall grass. Seeing him collapse like that crushed the last bit of hope I had left. I had just traveled to this world, ended up in the body of a weak girl, and now I was going to die. I was going to be a snack for a monster. The tiger demon licked its massive paws. Its tongue was thick and covered in jagged barbs. It wasn't in a hurry anymore. It actually looked at us with pity, telling us that human life was full of misery and we should just accept our end. It even promised to build us a tombstone as an act of charity. I wanted to scream. I had been in this world for less than 10 minutes. If I died now, I'd be the most pathetic loser in the history of time. Just as I felt the cold grip of total despair, something changed. An ancient, golden scroll unfurled in my mind. Letters formed on the parchment. My name was there, Jiang Yuechu. My realm was the lowest level. But the scroll explained a terrifying secret. I could gain Dao power by killing living creatures. I could use that power to turn demon blood into ink, recording their forms and stealing their supernatural abilities. I could even burn that power to boost my own strikes. It was a system. A cheat code. But how was I supposed to use it? I was a weak girl with no strength. I couldn't kill a demon. My eyes drifted to the ground. My hands shook as I reached down and gripped the handle of the fallen sword. The hilt was still warm from Pei Changqing's hand. Pei Changqing groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He saw me standing there, holding the blade. A look of bitter respect crossed his face. He probably thought I was being brave, a helpless girl trying to stand her ground against a god. He thought I was throwing my life away to protect him. He was wrong. To get power, I needed to kill something. The demon was impossible to touch, but the man at my feet was already dying. I'm sorry, I whispered. Pei Changqing blinked, confused. He didn't have time to ask what I meant. I gripped the sword with both hands and plunged it straight into his chest. The feeling of the blade tearing through muscle and bone vibrated up my arms. Warm, metallic blood sprayed across my face. His eyes went wide, reflecting a mix of shock and betrayal before the light in them finally vanished. My stomach turned. I wanted to throw up. I had killed a man. In my old life, I'd seen death on a screen, but the reality of it was crushing. The moral weight felt like it was going to snap my spine. The tiger demon stopped, tilting its head in confusion. It laughed, mocking me for being so cold-blooded. It called me heartless for killing my own comrade. It didn't understand why I'd bothered to kill a dying man. It thought I was just losing my mind. Then the scroll in my head flared with light. I had gained 20 years of Tao power from the kill. The world around me seemed to slow down. The guilt was still there, but survival was louder. I let go of the sword with one hand, then gripped it tight again as I ripped it out of Pei's chest. Blood splashed my clothes, turning the fabric a deep, dark crimson. This was my only chance. I didn't know if 20 years of power was enough to kill a monster that could regenerate its own heart, but I didn't have a choice. I poured every single drop of that power into my body. The sun was setting, casting a bloody red glow over the wasteland. I started to run. I wasn't a trained martial artist, but the power flowing through my veins made the sword feel light as a feather. The tiger demon roared, a sound that shook the very earth and sent dust swirling into the air. It was still injured from its earlier fight with the guards, but it was still a predator. It raised a massive, hooked claw and swung at me with the force of a falling mountain. I didn't blink. I stared at that claw and channeled everything I had into one desperate, horizontal slash. I didn't have a technique. I just had the raw instinct to stay alive. A flash of steel cut through the air. We crossed paths in a blur. I stumbled a few steps, my knees hitting the dirt hard. The sword flew from my hand, burying itself in the mud. I hacked up a mouthful of blood, my vision swimming as the 20 years of power drained out of me in an instant. The tiger demon stayed frozen, its claws still raised. The wind whistled through the grass. Then, with a wet thud, the massive tiger head slid off its shoulders and rolled into the dirt. I gasped for air, my lungs burning. I had done it. I was alive. The scroll in my mind glowed again. Killing the demon had granted me a staggering 100 years of Tao power. The system asked if I wanted to record the beast. I focused my mind, giving the command. The scroll began to draw itself, sketching a vivid, terrifying image of the tiger. The ink settled, and a new notification appeared. I had successfully recorded the Tiger Mountain God. As a reward, the system granted me a new skill, the tiger's rapid blade. In an instant, the knowledge of a master swordsman flooded my brain. I wasn't just a girl with a sword anymore. I was a killer. A sudden surge of power exploded from the scroll in my mind and poured back into my body. In an instant, the exhaustion and pain from my injuries vanished. I felt lighter and more powerful than I ever had in my life. At the same time, a flood of knowledge crashed into my brain. I saw visions of blade techniques, intricate footwork, and the secrets of generating lethal force. It was as if I had spent decades practicing the sword in a single heartbeat. I stood up slowly, staring at my hands. My fingers were slender, but they pulsed with a strength that felt bottomless. I walked over to where my straight blade was buried in the mud and gripped the hilt. It felt perfect. It was as if my hands were born to hold this weapon. I realized then how Tao power really worked. Spending it all at once for a temporary burst was a waste. The real path to power was recording demons. I focused my mind, and the system panel flickered back to life. Host Jiang Yuechu Realm *1 Initial Stage. Martial Arts Tiger's Rapid Blade, Perfected. Tao Power 25 years Recorded Demons Tiger Mountain God, Phantom. Phantom, I muttered to myself. And what exactly is the Wuxian realm? I guessed it was the cultivation system of this world. As for the phantom status, it probably meant I had only scratched the surface of the tiger's true power. If I spent more Tao power, could I evolve it? I looked at my remaining 25 years. Recording that beast had already cost me 75 years. God only knows how much the next stage would demand. I shook my head. For now, I needed to keep what I had left for emergencies. I turned around and walked back to the body of the guard who had tried to help me. I knelt beside him and gently closed his staring eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered. If I survive this, if I kill enough demons and gather enough power, maybe I'll find a way to bring you back. To give you a second chance. I paused, a bitter smile touching my lips. But don't hold your breath. In a world like this, I don't even know how long I'll last. Maybe I'll be joining you in the underworld sooner than I think. If we meet there, don't hit me. In a world crawling with demons, a person loses the luxury of being soft-hearted. The moon was cold and pale. I dragged Pei Changqing's body to a flat patch of earth and used my blade to dig. It took forever, and I only managed a shallow grave. It wasn't much, but in the middle of nowhere, being buried at all was a mercy. Once that was done, I turned to the other corpses, the Demon Suppression Bureau guards. They were dead, and their gear was going to waste. I pushed down my nausea and started searching them. I found some loose silver, some dried meat, and a leather canteen. Finally, I looked at a guard whose build was similar to mine. He looked young, almost a boy. "Forgive me, brother," I muttered. I stripped the black and red uniform off his body. I couldn't keep wearing my prisoner rags. They were a walking target. This official uniform was dangerous too, but between being a fugitive and being a government official, I'd take the one that could intimidate people. The clothes were stiff with dried blood and cold against my skin. I pulled my long hair up and tied it into a messy ponytail, just like I remembered the guards wearing. I hung the blade at my waist. I didn't have a mirror, but I could imagine how I looked. A bit of a mess, but when my hand touched the hilt of the sword, a wave of calm washed over me. I didn't linger. I found the main road and started walking. The road was empty, my only companion the lonely moon. As I walked, I tried to piece together where I was. This, Great Tang, seemed geographically similar to the history I knew. I was in the Longyu region, which was basically modern-day Gansu. It was a rugged frontier, bordering western territories and grasslands, a place of soldiers, bandits, and now, demons. My biggest problem wasn't the monsters, it was my ID. In this Tang dynasty, everyone needed a household tablet and travel permits. Without them, you were either a black household or a drifter. Either way, the authorities would throw you in a cell or worse. My original body belonged to the daughter of a high-ranking official, but since my family was executed for crimes, my ID was branded with the mark of a slave. Pei Changqing had promised to clear my name, but he was currently 6 feet under. I rubbed my temples. This was a nightmare. I had survived the tiger, but I was trapped in a legal dead end. Sure, I could live in the woods like a wild animal, killing beasts for power, but I didn't want to be a hermit. And trying to hide in a remote village was too risky. The government checked IDs everywhere. One step at a time, I sighed, looking up at the moon. Suddenly, the rhythmic thud of hooves echoed in the distance. It was getting closer. Fast. I tensed, my hand instinctively gripping my sword. A group of about a dozen riders emerged from the dust, torches flickering in the dark. They were well-armed men, looking exhausted and anxious. The leader saw me standing in the middle of the road and yanked his reins. Whoa! The horses screeched to a halt. The firelight spilled over me, illuminating the black and red uniform I had just stolen. The leader's face changed instantly. He scrambled off his horse and rushed forward, bowing deeply with his hands clasped. "Greetings, officer of the Demon Suppression Bureau." My heart skipped a beat. Talk about bad luck. I only put this outfit on to get through the night, and now I was being confronted by people who thought I was the real deal. I scanned the group. They were fit, professional, and their horses were top tier. I couldn't kill them all without someone escaping. I had to play the part. Don't talk, I told myself. The less you say, the better. I didn't answer him. I just stared at him with cold, silent eyes. The silence worked. The man grew even more nervous, his head bowing lower. After a long pause, I lowered my voice, trying to sound as deep and official as possible. "What is it?" My voice was a bit high for a man, but in the dark, with the uniform and the sword, I hoped I just sounded like a very young, very annoyed official. The man looked at me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He was clearly taken aback by how young I looked, and the fact that I was a woman. In this world, an officer of the Demon Suppression Bureau traveling alone in the middle of nowhere was unheard of. Usually, they traveled in squads. He shook his head, clearing his thoughts, and bowed even lower. Greetings, officer. My name is Qinqing Yuan. I'm the leader of the Flying Eagle sect in Guangwu County. He explained that they were acting under orders from the county magistrate to reinforce a place called Shangpan Village. Shangpan Village. I repeated, my voice low. Qinqing Yuan's face twisted with grief. 3 days ago, a pack of wolf demons had stormed the village. They didn't just raid it, they occupied it. They slaughtered the residents and took over. The magistrate sent the Flying Eagle sect to deal with them, but the demons were too strong. We lost 8 of our best men, he said, his voice trembling with shame. We were forced to retreat. We were heading back to the county seat to report our failure when we found you. He looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. To him, the Demon Suppression Bureau was a legend. If an officer was here, it meant hope. The lives of over 100 villagers are at stake, he choked out. Please, officer, save them. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He dropped to one knee. Behind him, the dozen riders scrambled off their horses and knelt in the dirt with a heavy thud. Please, officer, help us. Their voices echoed in the night. I stood there, completely numb. Great. Just great. I thought. God, you really love playing with me, don't you? I stayed silent for a long time. Qinqing Yuan started to fidget. He knew the bureau officials were often eccentric, but time was running out. He told me that when they first arrived, they thought it was a simple monster attack. They were wrong. The demons weren't just killing, they were farming. They had locked the survivors in the ancestral hall like cattle. Every day, they'd drag a few out and eat them alive in front of everyone else. Men were gutted. Women and children were treated as toys. The local soldiers were useless against monsters like these. The nearest major city was 10 days away by horse. By the time help arrived, Shangpan village would be a graveyard. I was their only hope. I stared at the group of hardened men kneeling on the road. Should I go, or should I run? The answer should have been obvious. I should run. I was barely surviving myself. Why should I risk my life for strangers? This world was cruel to everyone. If I died, nobody would cry for me. I didn't know how strong these wolves were. The smart move for any survivor was to find a quiet place, grind for experience, and level up safely. Only a fool would jump into a death trap for zero profit. With the uniform I was wearing, I could easily make up an excuse. I could tell them I was on a top-secret mission and walk away. They wouldn't dare stop me. I looked down at Qinqing Yuan. I saw the light in his eyes slowly dying. He took my silence as a rejection. To a high-ranking official, a few dozen peasants were probably just a footnote in a report. Not worth the effort. I understand, Qinqing Yuan whispered, his voice thick with bitterness. I apologize for overstepping. A heavy sigh rippled through the men behind him. The wind blew, kicking up dust around my boots. Damn it, a surge of irritation flared up in my chest. I wasn't a saint. I didn't want to be a hero. But seeing them like this, seeing that look of total defeat, it pissed me off. I took a deep breath and deepened my voice. Tell me the situation. Qinqing Yuan's head snapped up. He looked like he'd just seen a miracle. Officer, you mean you'll help? I looked away, annoyed. Stop wasting time. Yes, of course. He scrambled to his feet, bowing again. Thank you. Thank you for saving the people of Shangpan. The men behind him cheered, their faces lighting up. They weren't just being noble. Many of them had relatives in that village. They were fighting for their own blood. A young man with a fresh face rushed forward, leading a magnificent horse. He handed me the reins with shaky, respectful hands. I didn't hesitate. I swung into the saddle. I'd ridden a few times in my past life, and luckily, the muscle memory held up. I didn't look like an amateur. We turned the horses around and thundered back down the road. As the wind whipped past my ears, Qinqing Yuan rode beside me, shouting the details. There were 7 or 8 wolf demons. The leader was a massive beast with blue-gray fur. He could speak the human tongue and called himself the green-faced wolf lord. He was fast, strong, and his hide was like iron. 2 of my best swordsmen were torn apart in seconds. Qinqing Yuan shouted over the wind. I fought him myself. Even at full strength, I only managed to leave a scratch on his leg. I fear he has reached the Wenxian realm. Wenxian, that word again. I gripped the reins tighter. I didn't know much about the ranking system in this world, but I had a reference point. The tiger demon I killed was also at the Wuncian realm. I had 25 years of cultivation now, plus the mastery of the tiger-slaying blade. If they were the same level, I had a chance. The others are just minor demons, Chen continued. Cruel, but manageable. My men can handle them if you take care of the leader. I nodded silently, memorizing every word. We rode through the night. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, we reached the village. Shangpan village was built against a mountain, with a small river winding past it. It should have been a peaceful, beautiful place. But as we pulled our horses to a halt at the entrance, the peace was gone. The stone village marker was snapped in half. The streets were empty. Dark, dried blood stained the dirt. But the worst part was the wooden racks. Usually, villagers used them to dry clothes or meat. Now, they were draped with human remains. Limbs, torsos, and worse hung in the morning mist. Chen Qingyuan turned pale, his lips trembling. Even though he'd seen it before, the horror was too much. He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. Officer, this was Shangpan village. I stared at the scene, my face a mask of cold indifference, but my stomach was doing backflips. I forced the nausea down. This wasn't the time to be weak. Not far from the village entrance, two wolf demons were leaning against a mud wall. They were shirtless, wearing nothing but tattered shorts on their lower halves. They spotted us immediately, the uninvited guests. One of them tilted its neck back and let out a long, piercing howl. Whoa! Chen Qingyuan and his men looked grim. Their knuckles turned white as they gripped their weapons. Suddenly, several figures emerged from the depths of the village, sauntering toward us. The wolf demon leading them was different. He was wearing a green scholar's robe he'd clearly looted from somewhere. He had his claws tucked behind his back, pacing back and forth like a refined man of letters. But he was massive, and the robe was stretched so tight it looked like it was about to burst. It was a ridiculous, grotesque sight. The scholar wolf narrowed his glowing green eyes and let out a bored yawn. I thought some legendary figure had arrived. He sneered, his voice dripping with impatience. So, it's just you lot again. You were lucky enough to escape yesterday. Why come back today just to die? Behind Chen Qingyuan, a young man turned bright red with rage. He couldn't take it anymore. You beast, he screamed. You slaughtered our neighbors and stole our homes. Today we end this. The young man tried to dismount, but Chen Qingyuan grabbed his arm, holding him back. Chen's eyes weren't on the demon, they were on me. The wolf demon grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Why the anger? You humans eat pigs and sheep. We wolves eat humans. It's the natural order of the world. To me, your neighbors are no different from livestock in a pen. They're just snacks. The men from the Flying Eagle sect looked like they were about to explode. Their eyes were bloodshot with hatred. Then, a crisp sound broke the tension. I swung myself off my horse. My boots hit the dusty road with a dull thud. I didn't say a word. I just rested my hand on the hilt of my blade and began to walk. 1 step, 2 steps, straight toward the wolf in the green robe. The demon stopped his bragging. His gaze shifted away from Chen Qingyuan and landed on my slender frame. When he saw my black uniform with the crimson patterns, he straightened up. The claws he had hidden behind his back slowly dropped to his sides. I stopped walking. I stood right at the edge of the morning light and the long shadows of the village. The wolf stared at me with those emerald eyes, his voice cautious now. Zenmosi? An inquisitor? I slowly lifted my head. My long hair was tied back, revealing my pale, cold face. Green-faced wolf king? I asked. I didn't bother answering his question. The demon's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Yes, he replied instinctively. As soon as the word left his mouth, he felt a surge of annoyance. He realized that, in terms of sheer presence, he had already lost a step to me. I let out a cold, sharp laugh. Good. Killing a beast that can talk makes this worth my time. The wolf flew into a rage. If you weren't wearing that skin, I wouldn't even waste my breath on you. He roared the words, but even as he said them, he felt off. He realized he was subconsciously trying to match my tone. It frustrated him. He stopped talking and raised a claw. 5 razor-sharp nails slid out like daggers. Kill her. Tear her apart. At his command, the smaller demons behind him didn't hesitate. They let out guttural growls and dropped to all fours, lunging at me like gray streaks of lightning. The morning wind whistled, kicking up dust. Chun Qingyuan and his men held their breath, their hearts in their throats. In that heartbeat, my fingers closed around the hilt. The blade cleared the scabbard with a sharp ring. I didn't even look at the small fry rushing toward me. My eyes were locked on the leader. I unleashed the full power of my tiger-slaying blade mastery. No holding back. I swung vertically. The edge of the blade caught the morning sun and crashed down into the dirt. A terrifying, murderous aura exploded from the strike. The air around me turned ice cold. Chun Qingyuan and his men felt a blur before their eyes, and for a second, they thought they heard the roar of a tiger echoing through the wind. The Wolf King, who had been looking on with amusement, was suddenly paralyzed with horror. Every instinct in his body screamed that he could not block this hit. In the split second before impact, he couldn't even dodge. He reached out, grabbed one of his own subordinates who was rushing past, and threw the smaller demon in front of him. The light of my blade flashed. The meat shield demon didn't even have time to react. A thin red line appeared from the top of its skull down to its crotch. A second later, the body was split perfectly in half. Hot blood and organs spilled across the ground. What a brutal blade. What speed, Chun Qingyuan whispered, stunned. He and his men were frozen, forgetting to even help. The other lunging wolves skidded to a halt, their claws digging into the dirt. They whimpered, their furry tails tucking tightly between their legs. But I didn't stop. I stepped forward, my momentum carrying me like an arrow released from a bow. My blade swung in a cruel, horizontal arc. Asterisk squelch. 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 Asterisk. 3 massive wolf heads flew into the air. Fountains of hot blood sprayed 5 feet high. From start to finish, it had only been a few seconds. The green-faced Wolf King watched his pack get decimated in the blink of an eye. The few survivors were so terrified they backed away, trembling. He stood there, stunned, until the shock turned into pure, burning rage. For demons, cultivation is hard. Aside from the lucky few who find ancient treasures, bloodline demons like him find it incredibly difficult to reproduce. In decades, his entire lineage consisted of only these few followers. And I had just ended them. "Stop it," he roared. I acted as if I hadn't heard him. I tilted my blade down, letting a single drop of demon blood slide off the tip and soak into the dirt. I exhaled a slow breath of mist. "The strong eat the weak," I said, looking at him with calm, empty eyes. "Isn't that the natural order? You sounded so convinced a moment ago. Why are you so angry now?" The wolf's green robe shredded as his muscles bulged and expanded. "You will die." He dropped to all fours. The ground cracked under his hind legs as he launched himself at me. He was a green blur wrapped in a foul, stinking wind. As he closed the distance, a thick, black demonic mist erupted from his body. This wasn't a normal attack. This was a high-level demonic technique. I didn't dodge. I didn't flinch. I let out a sharp cry and leaped high into the air. My blood surged, and my cultivation roared to life. Behind me, the faint, shimmering silhouette of a massive, blood-colored tiger appeared. Roar. The sound shook the wilderness. One high, one low. One rising, one falling. We collided in the middle of the road. The blade sank into his shoulder. His claws tore through my flesh. Black mist clashed with red energy, and the tiger phantom shattered upon impact. We were both thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. I grunted, feeling the metallic taste of blood rising in my throat. I forced myself to swallow it. I looked down at my stomach. My black uniform was shredded by 3 deep claw marks, and blood was already soaking through the fabric. I didn't know any fancy martial arts. All I had was this one blade technique I had taken from a tiger. My blade work was wide and powerful, driving forward with everything I had, but it only went so far. The green-faced Wolf King staggered to his feet. I had nearly cleaved his left shoulder bone in 2, but the sheer madness in his eyes made him forget the pain. He was a monster driven by pure, bloodthirsty rage. Behind me, Chun Qingyuan and his men from the Flying Eagle sect finally snapped out of their shock. Chun Qingyuan's face was deathly pale as he roared, "Protect the Lord Inquisitor!" With a frantic clatter of steel, a dozen men drew their weapons. They scrambled over, stumbling and crawling, to form a desperate circle around my swaying body. They pointed their swords at the Wolf King like they were facing a god of death. Further down the road, the few remaining small fry demons saw their king's state and lost their nerve. They let out pathetic whimpers, tucked their tails, and fled into the darkness. They didn't dare stay a second longer. At the end of the day, seeking benefit and avoiding harm is the instinct of every living thing. Birds, beasts, and demons are all the same. But humans? Humans have the power to suppress that instinct for something greater. That is the difference between a man and a beast. Hidden behind the wall of men, I finally had a moment to think. This Wolf King was powerful, but he lacked the eerie, supernatural tricks of the tiger demon I had faced before. He was definitely weaker than the tiger. When I killed that tiger demon with one strike, I had been lucky. It was already heavily wounded. But fighting this wolf made me realize something. I couldn't underestimate the Wuxian realm. Even if I managed to kill him with my current strength, I'd be crippled in the process. I was in a sensitive position. I couldn't afford a heavy injury right now. I closed my eyes. In the depths of my mind, the ancient scroll flickered to life. Cultivation, 152 years. I had 25 years left before, but after slaughtering those smaller demons, the number had jumped back up. I exhaled a breath of bloody mist. It was time to cheat. I didn't hesitate. With a single thought, I unleashed all 152 years of cultivation. It poured into the tiger demon, painting like a dam bursting open. Everything around me, Chun Qing Yuan's shouting, the wolf snarling, faded away. The world turned black and white. My consciousness sank into an endless void. Year 1. I was born. I was a weak cub in the southern mountains, abandoned by my mother. If a flood hadn't washed me downstream, I would have been a snack for another predator. Year 2. I learned to hunt. I survived. Year 5. I met a monster covered in long white fur. He sat under a waterfall, holding a book. I was hungry, so I tried to eat him. He beat the hell out of me. Year 6. I stayed by his side. He didn't chase me away. Sometimes he tossed me his leftover peaches. I learned his name, Lord Bai Yuan. Year 7. I learned to read. My claws were too big to hold a brush, so I kept breaking the bamboo scrolls. Bai Yuan was patient. He told me everything in the world could be a brush, and the earth itself was a story. Year 8. I knew 300 words. Bai Yuan was happy. He told me stories of how the world began, how humans were the spirit of all things, and how demons were the wisdom of heaven and earth. Year 10. I could read on my own. I loved tales of wandering swordsmen. I especially loved their blades. One strike to part a river. One strike to split a mountain. Year 15. Bai Yuan taught me more. He said a demon shouldn't just know how to kill, or it's no different from a wild beast. He said humans are human because they understand reason and shame. I thought he was talking nonsense. He hit me on the head with his book for 3 days straight. Year 20. I swung my blade at the southern mountain waterfall. I cut the flow of water in half. Bai Yuan laughed and clapped. As I stood there, watching the river break because of me, I felt true joy for the first time. Year 25. I grew restless. Reading and practicing every day felt small. I felt like the mountain was too far from the world, and the mountain was too small for me. Year 30. My blade technique was perfected. Bai Yuan asked if there was anything my blade couldn't cut. I shook my head with confidence. Year 35. I met a girl gathering herbs. She didn't run. She shared half a cake with me. I found it strange and didn't eat it. Year 39. The girl stopped coming. The mountain demon said she was married off to a wealthy man. Within 6 months, he beat her to death. I took my blade and went down the mountain. Year 45. Bai Yuan was leaving. He sat beside me and talked for a long time. I asked where he was going. He just smiled. Year 50. I stood at the peak of the southern mountain, looking down at the world of men. The wind blew. I decided it was time for me to go down too. My consciousness snapped back. A drop of crimson light appeared in my mind, rippling like ink in water. Consumed 102 years of cultivation. Progress, bead tinting. The Tiger Mountain God scroll glowed as the outline of the tiger was filled with life. I had gained the demon's gift, the tiger's swift blade. My mastery and power with the blade surged. And then, the supernatural ability, tiger's blood restoration. It allowed me to consume my own blood essence to heal injuries in an instant. I looked down at my stomach. The 3 claw marks were deep enough to see bone. The flesh was mangled and dripping. I focused. Tiger's blood restoration. A searing heat erupted from my core, rushing through my limbs. My blood felt like it was boiling. The wound on my stomach began to crawl and writhe. In just a few breaths, the horrific gashes vanished, leaving behind only 3 faint red lines. I gripped my blade. A change had come over me. It was a feeling of absolute power. This felt like an eternity, but in the real world, it was only a second. To Chun Qingyuan and his men, I had simply staggered after taking a hit. But the Wolf King saw it clearly. He had used his full strength in that last strike. He knew I should be dying. His eyes widened in pure terror. What are you? Are you human or a demon? He actually took a step back. The villagers didn't understand what he meant, but then I reached out and pushed Chun Qingyuan aside. Lord Inquisitor, you're hurt, Chun Qingyuan stammered. I didn't answer. I gripped my blade and lunged. I moved like a gale of wind toward the terrified wolf. The tiger's swift blade roared to life. Before the steel even reached him, the wind picked up. A tiger's roar echoed from the heavens, shaking the very forest. The Wolf King's face turned green. His legs shook. His tongue lolled out in fear. How was this strike 3 times more powerful than the last one? If he had known I was this strong, he would have run long ago. He thought I had been playing with him, luring him into a trap. Fear completely replaced his rage. He didn't even try to fight. He turned to flee. But as he twisted his body, a chill ran up his spine. The cold edge of my blade was already touching the back of his head. Spare. He didn't get the word out. His world was split down the middle by a line of brilliant white light. The Wolf King's body froze in midair. Then he fell. His body split perfectly in 2, collapsing to the left and right, leaving his steaming guts scattered across the road. Steam rose from the cooling blood on the road. I slowly sheathed my blade, the tension in my shoulders finally dissolving. My mastery of the tiger-slaying blade had reached a supreme level. Combined with the power of the silver-maned celestial beast, cutting down a demon of this caliber was no longer a struggle. A notification flickered in my mind. For killing a Wenxian realm creature, I had gained 75 years of cultivation. The system also detected an unrecorded demon and asked if I wanted to spend cultivation to document it. I ignored it for a moment, my gaze shifting toward the distance. A few low-level wolf demons had survived the slaughter. They were terrified, tails tucked between their legs as they scrambled to flee. I let out a dry, cold breath. I had been so focused on their king that I almost forgot about the runts. I didn't let them get far. I moved like a shadow, catching up to each one in seconds. By the time I stopped, the entire pack was gone. Behind me, the villagers and the men from the Flying Eagle sect stood frozen. They looked at the carnage in stunned silence. A nest of demons that had been terrorizing the countryside was simply deleted. I could see the question in their eyes. Was I this strong because I was an inquisitor, or was I an inquisitor because I was this strong? As the sun climbed higher, the men from the Flying Eagle sect began the grim work of cleaning up. They cut down the mangled bodies from the wooden racks and covered them with rags. Others led the survivors out of the ancestral hall. When those poor souls saw the dead wolves and the blood-soaked road, the silence broke. Some fell to their knees, bowing to the sect members in gratitude. Others collapsed over the remains of their loved ones, their wailing filling the air. I leaned against a half-collapsed mud wall at the village entrance, crossing my arms. I closed my eyes and let my consciousness sink into my mind. A new status panel unfolded before me. Name, Lin Yuan. Realm, Wenxian Middle Stage. Martial Arts, Tiger Slaying Blade, Supreme, Green Cliff Echo, Perfect. Cultivation, 200 years. Recorded Demons, Tiger Mountain God, Green-Faced Wolf King. Innate Talents, Silver-Maned Celestial Beast, Tiger Fiend Lungs. I frowned slightly. My cultivation had jumped when I recorded the Tiger Mountain God, and now, with the Wolf King added, my realm had climbed again. I wasn't entirely sure how the math worked. Was it the recording of the demon or the acquisition of the martial arts that pushed me forward? Recording the Wolf King had cost me 50 years of cultivation, which was cheaper than the Tiger God. It made sense. He was weaker. As for the smaller demons I killed, they provided cultivation points but weren't significant enough to be recorded. The system clearly had high standards. I focused on the new technique I had gained, Green Cliff Echo. It was a fist technique, but it was the polar opposite of the tiger-slaying blade. While the blade was about raw, dominant power, this fist style focused on footwork and shifting forms. It was elusive, moving like a wolf through the trees. Here 1 second, gone the next. The crying in the village began to fade into low, rhythmic sobs. Footsteps approached and stopped right in front of me. I opened my eyes. It was Chunqing Yuan. He didn't speak at first. He simply hiked up his robes, preparing to kneel again. "Don't," I said shortly. He paused mid-motion, then straightened up. He didn't kneel, but he bowed deeply, his hands clasped in respect. "Lord Inquisitor, you have saved us all. Neither I nor the people of Guangwu County will ever forget this debt." I didn't give him an answer. I pushed off the wall and patted the dust from my clothes. The job was done. It was time for me to move on and figure out how to handle my identity in this world. Seeing me prepare to leave, Chunqing Yuan grew anxious. "My lord, you're leaving already. Please, come back to Guangwu County with us to rest. Let us show you at least a bit of hospitality." I hesitated. Going to a proper town sounded like a good idea. I needed information, and a place to wash up wouldn't hurt. But I was worried about my status as an outsider. Chunqing Yuan seemed to read my mind. "Are you on a secret mission, my lord? If you wish to remain low profile, we will not say a word. Even if the county magistrate asks, I will tell him my sect handled the wolves. Your presence will remain a secret." He paused, his eyes flickering briefly toward my midsection. "Besides, your clothes. You've had a long journey." I looked down and realized the problem. The wolf's claws had shredded the front of my black tunic. Even though my skin had healed thanks to my tiger-fiend lungs, the fabric was hanging in tatters, revealing far more skin than was appropriate. In my past life, I wouldn't have cared. I used to play basketball shirtless all the time. But now, I was in a woman's body. Walking around like this was asking for trouble. I looked at Chunqing Yuan's sincere face. With 200 years of cultivation and 2 high-level martial arts, what did I have to fear from a small county town? "Fine," I said. "Lead the way." The walls of Guangwu County weren't very high. The gray stone bricks were worn down by wind and sand, revealing the yellowish earth underneath. We arrived at the gate on horseback. The guards there looked tired, their swords hanging loosely at their hips. One of them recognized Chunqing Yuan. "Master Chun, back from Shangpan village." Chunqing Yuan dismounted, showing no arrogance. "It's been a long day, brother." The guard's eyes drifted past him to me. I was sitting tall on my horse, looking out of place. In this region, the wind and sun usually turned women's skin a deep bronze, but I was pale and fine-featured. Luckily, Chunqing Yuan had found a thick hemp cloak for me to wear, hiding my torn black clothes. Chunqing Yuan leaned in and whispered to the guard, his voice full of fake pity. "The demons snatched this poor girl from somewhere. I'm bringing her back to the sect to find her some work. She's had a hard time." The guard nodded, not suspecting a thing. In these times, families were destroyed by demons every day. It wasn't unusual to find survivors. He just muttered something under his breath about Chunqing Yuan being lucky to find such a pretty girl to keep the bed warm. I ignored him. Inside the city, the streets were quiet. People walked with their heads down, scurrying along as if afraid to attract attention. The shops were open, but there was no shouting, no life. I saw yellow talismans pasted on walls and wooden swords hanging over doorways, pitiful attempts at protection that wouldn't stop a real demon for a second. The whole place felt dead. We stopped at a modest but clean-looking courtyard. Chunqing Yuan waved his men away, and they left without a word. He then turned to me and bowed. "My lord, this is a private residence for the Flying Eagle sect. It's quiet here." He pushed open the door and gestured for me to enter. An old woman with white hair stood under the eaves, flanked by 2 young maids. They bowed silently. "Prepare hot water," Chunqing Yuan ordered. "Find a clean set of women's clothes and prepare a feast." The old woman glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes before she looked down. Chunqing Yuan turned back to me, bowing again. "I must go report to the county magistrate and explain what happened at the village. Please, rest here." Do not be a stranger. If you need anything, just tell the servants. I gave a short grunt in response. It was enough of an answer for Qin Yuan. He didn't say another word, turning on his heel and leaving the courtyard, pulling the heavy wooden gate shut behind him. Now, it was just me and the 3 servants. The old woman looked at me with clear confusion, wondering who I was, but she had seen how her master treated me. She bowed low, her voice respectful. "Miss, please follow me." A few minutes later, I was in a room thick with rising steam. A massive wooden tub sat in the center. The maids poured in bucket after bucket of hot water, tossing in a handful of unknown herbs that released a faint, clean fragrance. "My lord, your clean clothes will be brought shortly," the old woman said. She led the 2 young maids out and clicked the door shut. I didn't move. I stood there in the silence, listening. A moment later, one of the maids poked her head back in, clutching a stack of folded garments. She froze when she saw me still standing there in my filthy, oversized hemp robe. "Miss," she whispered. I turned my head slightly, my eyes cold. "Leave them there. And don't come back in unless I call for you." "Yes, ma'am." She scurried out, and the door clicked shut again. I moved then. I grabbed a heavy wooden bench used for holding wash basins and dragged it across the floor. I jammed it firmly under the door handle. Only then did I let out a breath and untie the hemp robe, letting it hit the floor. Underneath was my black uniform, stained with dried blood and grime. I unbuckled my belt, set my blade aside, and stripped off the rest of my gear. My body was lean but well-proportioned. I stepped into the tub. SSS. The heat hit my skin like a shock. I slowly sat down, sinking until the water reached my chin, leaving only my head above the surface. I let out a long, jagged breath. The tension that had been coiled in my spine for days finally began to loosen. I looked at my blurred reflection in the water. Pale, sharp features. I was actually quite good-looking. More importantly, this body didn't have much of a chest to speak of. Just small, firm curves that wouldn't get in the way during a fight. My legs, though, felt longer than I remembered. Maybe training in martial arts actually makes you taller? I closed my eyes and started scrubbing the grime away, trying to quiet my racing mind. I needed to think. The residency permit was still a problem, but there was something else bothering me. What exactly did my father do? The Jiang family in the capital wasn't the most powerful, but we were a family of scholars and officials for generations. My father, Jiang's son, was the vice minister of rights, a third-rank official. In my memories, he was a stiff, old-fashioned scholar who loved his books and his garden. Something didn't add up. The laws of the Great Tang were brutal. For a whole family to be sentenced to exile, the crime had to be massive, treason or collaborating with the enemy. But a vice minister of rights? He dealt with sacrifices, etiquette, and imperial exams. He didn't have any military power. He didn't control the granaries or the treasury. How could he possibly plot a rebellion? Even if the family was guilty, the law stated that female relatives should be sent to the government brothels. Why go through the massive effort of escorting a helpless girl like me all the way to the border? And the escorts, that was the strangest part. Usually, the Ministry of Justice handles exiles using local deputies. Even in high-profile cases involving dangerous criminals, they'd use the military. But I was escorted by the Zenmosi, the demon hunters. Since when did they have so much free time? I opened my eyes, water dripping from my eyelashes. Damn it. I thought my biggest problem was just getting a fake ID so I could live my life. But this body's past was a minefield of secrets. Far away in Liangzhou Prefecture, the wind was howling. This place was the heart of the border, vital because of the dark, ominous building in the north of the city, the governor's office of the Zenmosi. Inside the back hall, a middle-aged man in black robes sat behind a wide desk, absorbed in a book. The sound of steady footsteps broke the silence. A young man in the black and red uniform of an inquisitor walked in, his posture as straight as a spear. He stopped 3 paces from the desk and cupped his fists. "Commander." The man behind the desk, Wei He, didn't look up. "Report. Urgent news from Lanzhou," the young man said. 2 weeks ago, 6 villages under Jincheng County were wiped out overnight. No survivors. And the demonic energy? It lingered for 3 days. According to the surviving soldiers, the attacker used sword qi. It doesn't match the usual patterns of a demon. Also, The creature gave itself a title. Wei He finally closed his book and looked up. What title? The young man's expression turned strange. The black-robed sword immortal. Wei He was silent for a moment, then let out a short, dry laugh. A sword immortal? Demons are getting more arrogant by the day. He tapped his fingers on the desk. But if the energy lasted 3 days, this thing has reached the Nether Valley realm. The young man felt a chill. An entity at that level was a disaster. What are your orders, Commander? Gather a team. You and Sun Yin will take them to Lanzhou immediately. Understood. Wei He looked out the window, his eyes narrowing. By the way, that prisoner they sent from the capital, have they cleared the pass yet? The young man paused, realizing who he meant. You mean the one Pei Chongqing is escorting? They should have reached Guangwu County yesterday. Guangwu isn't far from Jincheng, Wei He muttered. Let's hope young Pei has some luck. I'd hate for him to run straight into a Nether Valley demon. The young man frowned. Pei Chongqing was a decent fighter, but against an entity like that, he'd be crushed like an ant. He hesitated, then spoke up. Commander, there's one thing I don't understand. The Jiang family case is already closed. Why use our people for a simple escort? The room went deathly silent. After a long time, Wei He turned around, his face unreadable. What do you think? I don't know, sir. Then don't ask. Back in the courtyard, the night was deep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling rafters. My blade was right beside me. It was uncomfortable, the scabbard poking into my side, but I didn't care. Safety came first. My mind was a mess. I couldn't sleep. After tossing and turning for an hour, I sat up and slapped myself hard across the face. Get it together, Jiang Yuechu, I hissed. Thinking about it won't change a thing. With a thought, the ancient scroll unfurled in my mind. Current cultivation, 200 years. My eyes fell on the 2 demon portraits I had collected. I had so much power stored up, but I wasn't sure where to put it. Should I keep feeding the Tiger Mountain God, or try the green-faced Wolf King? The tiger was already at the Stained Pearl realm. I didn't know how much more it would take to level up again. If I dumped all 200 years in and it wasn't enough to break through, I'd be stuck. But the tiger had cost 75 years to record, while the wolf only took 50. The wolf was weaker, which meant it would be cheaper to upgrade. I focused my mind on the shadow of the snarling green wolf. It was time to see what this thing could really do. If I could upgrade these demons, I could unlock their innate powers. The question was whether to focus on quality or quantity. Should I master one, or become a jack of all trades? I decided to play it safe. I focused my mind, and the river of my 200 years of cultivation flowed out, pouring entirely into the shadowy image of the green-faced Wolf King. The world around me turned blood-red. Everything else faded away. In the first year, I was born on Black Wind Mountain, the cub of a wolf demon. On the day I first opened my eyes, I watched another monster eat my mother. By the 5th year, I was training slower than any of my brothers. They mocked me. They bullied me. Even my father, the great demon king, looked at me with nothing but disgust. I made a silent vow to change that. In the 10th year, I discovered the secret. My brothers were growing so fast because they were eating humans. Human flesh accelerated cultivation. I tried it myself. It worked. By the 15th year, the bodies piled up. I began to believe that demons were born to kill humans. Humans were the essence of the world, the favorites of heaven and earth. By killing them, I was stealing the world's very luck for myself. In the 20th year, I murdered my father. I became the leader of the Black Wind Mountain Wolves. I gave myself a name, the Green-Faced Lord. By the 35th year, I hit a wall. I started searching for a way to break through, to find a power beyond the mundane. Suddenly, the vision snapped. The sea of blood receded. I jerked my eyes open. Outside the window, the crescent moon still hung in the sky. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. I had spent 80 years of my stored power. The green-faced Lord's progress had reached the Stained Pearl realm. On the scroll in my mind, the wolf's eyes glowed with a faint, bloody light. A gift from the demon flooded my senses. I had gained a supreme talent, wolf form for 1,000 miles. The green-faced Lord was cunning and ghost-like. Now, my own speed and movement had surged. I exhaled a long breath of hot air. I held up my hand, spreading my fingers in the dark. I clenched my fist tight, and for a split second, the phantom image of sharp claws flickered over my knuckles. My combat style felt more fluid, more natural. My body felt lighter, leaner. I frowned slightly. I hadn't unlocked a specific supernatural ability, just a passive talent. Still, an upgrade was an upgrade. No point dwelling on it. I checked the scroll again. I had 120 years left. That should be enough to level up my actual cultivation rank, right? Wait, my brow furrowed deeper. My rank was still stuck at the late stage of the Wenxian realm. What was going on? I thought recording demons or upgrading the scroll would automatically push my own realm higher. But nothing had changed. Not a single inch of progress. I rubbed my temples in frustration. This was a massive headache. The girl whose body I inhabited had absolutely zero useful memories about martial arts. Her head was filled with useless junk. Fine, I muttered. I'll ask Qinqing Yuan tomorrow. The Flying Eagle sect was a martial arts organization. Even if they were small-time, they had to know the basics of how cultivation worked. I laid back down, resting my heavy blade on the pillow next to me. I needed sleep. The night wind drifted through the window, tossing a few strands of hair across my face. I shifted into a more comfortable position and drifted off. The next morning, the sky was a dull, misty gray. I woke up before the sun was fully out. I stared at the unfamiliar rafters, listening to the distant sound of a rooster crowing. It took a moment for reality to sink in. This wasn't a dream. I sat up, the blanket sliding off my shoulders to reveal my thin collarbones. The morning chill helped clear my head. I got out of bed, changed my clothes, and grabbed a strip of cloth to tie my long hair back into a high, practical ponytail. I grabbed my blade and pushed the door open with a creak. A young maid was standing in the courtyard, looking like she'd been waiting for hours. She bowed quickly and rushed off, returning a moment later with a basin of water. I walked over and splashed my face. The water was lukewarm, just right. The maid then handed me a tray with a willow branch and a small jar of green salt. I stared at it for a second. Right, ancient toothbrushes. You chew the end of the branch until it's frayed, dip it in salt, and scrub. I tried it, following the faint memories in my head. It tasted like bitterwood mixed with salt. It was terrible. But I'd have to get used to it. I tossed the branch back into the basin just as I heard footsteps. Qinqing Yuan was at the gate. He waved the maid away, and she scurried off with the water as if she'd been granted a royal pardon. Sir, Qinqing Yuan said, clasping his hands. Did you rest well? Good enough, I replied shortly. I picked up a cloth and wiped the water from my face. Qinqing Yuan seemed to have figured out my personality by now. I was cold and brief, but I wasn't angry. He looked visibly relieved. Sir, I went to the county office last night, he said, watching me closely. I stopped wiping my face and looked at him, waiting for the rest. I reported the incident at Shangpan village to the magistrate. He continued quickly. I told him the Flying Eagle sect managed to wipe out the wolf demons through sheer luck and sacrifice. I mentioned we lost many brothers in the fight. He peeked at my expression. I kept my face like stone. He probably thought I was one of those cold on the outside, warm on the inside types, but I knew if I gave him an inch, he'd take a mile. I tossed the cloth back into the basin. Internally, I gave him a thumbs up. The man knew how to handle a cover-up. I stretched, my joints popping with a satisfying series of clicks. A night of rest had done wonders. I picked up the bundle containing my old, blood-stained Zenmosi uniform. I couldn't stay here. The Jiang family case was weird, and my fake identity wouldn't survive a real investigation. Qinqing Yuan blinked when he saw me grabbing my things. Sir, you're leaving already. I nodded. Official business. I can't delay. I paused, remembering my confusion from last night. One more thing. Anything, sir? Please, speak. I turned toward him, the morning wind ruffling my hair. Do you have any books here? Specifically about the path of martial arts. Qinqing Yuan looked stunned. He probably thought I was asking for his sect's secret techniques. But the Flying Eagle sect didn't have any secrets worth stealing. Compared to the Zenmosi, they were barely above street performers. He probably figured I was a new recruit looking to study folk styles to broaden my horizons. Sir, you must be joking, he said, his voice dripping with humility. Our Flying Eagle sect only teaches basic exercises. Nothing that would interest someone of your caliber. He chose his words carefully, terrified of offending me. We have a few manuals passed down through the generations. One is the 13 Flying Eagle Claws. It's our foundation. It focuses on speed and precision. Then there's the Wind Greeting Blade. Our founder traded some goods to a merchant for a few tattered pages of it. It only has 3 moves. No finesse, just raw strength for life and death brawls. As he spoke, his face turned a shade of red. He clearly felt embarrassed offering such trash to an inquisitor. He looked more nervous by the second. It's really not fit for a refined setting, Qinqing Yuan said, his voice dropping with embarrassment. If you don't mind, sir, I'll go fetch it for you to look over. I watched him, feeling a dull ache behind my eyes. I slowly shook my head. That's not what I'm looking for. Qinqing Yuan froze again. He was completely lost. If I didn't want secret manuals, what did I want? The truth was, I was in a dangerous spot. I didn't know the difference between the martial stages, and that ignorance could get me killed. I was like a man holding a legendary dragon-slaying blade who had no idea what a dragon actually looked like or how it behaved. But I couldn't just tell him that. I couldn't say, "Hey man, I'm actually a total newbie. Can you explain the basics?" That was the fastest way to admit my identity was a total lie. I rubbed my temples, thinking fast. Lately, I said, my voice low, I felt like I'm about to break through to the next realm. Qinqing Yuan's entire body stiffened. His pupils dilated. Breakthrough. He looked at me, likely thinking about how I was barely 20 years old and already possessed such terrifying power. To him, the idea that I was reaching an even higher level was proof of the Zenmosi's incredible heritage. I ignored his shock and kept going. The foundation was laid too quickly, I said, staring him down with a calm, steady gaze. I'm worried about gaps. A tower 10,000 feet tall starts from the ground. If the foundation is shaky, the higher it goes, the faster it falls. I need the most basic, elementary principles of martial arts to cross-reference my own path. I need to find the holes in my foundation. Do you understand? A look of realization washed over his face. I see. You're preparing for the breakthrough by returning to the source. Most warriors throw away the basics the second they get a high-level technique. Only someone truly aiming for the peak would value the foundation this much. I understand, sir. Please wait. I'll go get it right now. He scrambled out of the courtyard. I didn't rush him. I just leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, and closed my eyes to rest. A few minutes later, the sound of hurried footsteps returned. Qinqing Yuan held out a thin booklet. For words were written on the cover in neat, formal script, The True Path of Martial Arts. He offered it with both hands, his breath still ragged. Sir, please, see if this is of any use. I opened my eyes and took it. I didn't flip through it immediately. I just felt its weight and looked at him. Sir, Qinqing Yuan explained quickly, this book was compiled by the Ministry of War and the Imperial Academy. It's an introductory text for soldiers and common martial artists. It covers everything from the mortal realm to the Wenxian realm and even the Minggu realm. It details the characteristics of each stage, methods for moving blood and qi, and even some basic ways to identify demons. It's not rare, but I didn't realize this was what you needed. I nodded, satisfied. A beginner's manual issued by the government. Exactly what I needed. Thank you. Qinqing Yuan waved his hands frantically. You honor me, sir. It's my privilege to serve you. He hesitated for a moment, then couldn't help himself. Sir, are you here because of what happened in Jincheng County? Jincheng County? What the hell was Jincheng County? My face remained a mask of ice. I didn't say a word, just gave him a cold, sharp glance. That look sent a visible shiver down his spine. A layer of cold sweat broke out on his back. He looked like he wanted to slap himself for being so stupid. Who was he to ask about Zenmosi business? Their cases were top secret. Even a local magistrate would have to bow and keep his mouth shut. Rumor had it that an inquisitor could execute anyone who interfered with their work on the spot. I spoke too much. Please forgive me. Qinqing Yuan bowed low, his voice trembling. I meant no disrespect, sir. It's just that Jincheng is only 100 miles from here. Half a month ago, 6 villages there were slaughtered in a single night. Not a single person or animal was left alive. Now, refugees are flooding into our Guangwu County. Everyone is terrified, saying it's only a matter of time before the Zenmosi arrives to investigate. I was just being bold. He finished in one breath, sweat dripping from his forehead. He didn't dare look me in the eye again. The wind was harsh, kicking up dust and sand as my horse trotted along the yellow dirt road. I leaned back in the saddle, one hand holding the reins and the other holding the booklet. My predecessor had been well-educated, so even though the text was a bit dense, I could figure out the meaning. In this world, martial arts were everything. It started with the mortal realm. This was about moving blood and chi to temper the muscles and bones. It was the solid stage of martial arts. Nothing fancy, just hard work, sweat, and time. Most people in the world never made it past this. Above that was the Wenxian realm. At this stage, a warrior's blood and chi reached a certain volume. Internally, you could hear your own heartbeat and the flow of your blood. Externally, your senses became sharp enough to hear the wind in the grass. This was the true entrance to the path. According to the book, the better your techniques, the more efficiently you could move your chi, and the faster you would progress. I realized I was currently in the late stages of the Wenxian realm. The reason the wolf demon's cultivation hadn't pushed me into the next stage was likely because its techniques were too low-grade. I kept reading. After Wenxian came the Minggu realm, the drums of war. My breathing slowed as I read the description. At this stage, blood and chi reached every corner of the body, refining the bones until they vibrated with the sound of struck metal. A warrior at this level had a body so strong that ordinary blades couldn't even scratch them. They were no longer mere mortals. But breaking through to Minggu was incredibly difficult. Beyond mastering your techniques, you needed massive amounts of rare treasures or the flesh and blood of powerful demons to ignite your chi and force the breakthrough. I closed the book and tucked it into my robe. It looked like my future cultivation was tied directly to hunting. Everything came back to demons. I guess I was born to be a slayer. I let out a self-deprecating laugh. If I were actually a real member of the Zenmosi, life would be so much easier. My identity wouldn't be a problem, and I'd have a government salary to hunt demons legally. Instead, I had to watch my back every second while trying to find where the monsters were hiding. I shook the thoughts away and focused on the road. My goal was Jincheng County. I didn't know much about the demon there, or how strong it was, but I had to find out. Time waited for no one, and I didn't have many choices left. Demons weren't like the NPCs in the video games from my past life. They didn't just stand around waiting for a hero to show up and kill them. The clever ones were slippery. As soon as they heard the Imperial Court was sending an elite force to wipe them out, they'd vanish into the deepest forests. They'd wait until the heat died down, then crawl back out to terrorize the innocent all over again. That was one of the main reasons I wanted to infiltrate the Zenmosi. Information was power. I traveled along the main road, blending in as best I could. I had swapped my black and red Inquisitor uniform for ordinary traveler's clothes. Without the official gear, I looked like any other wanderer from the martial world. I sat high on my horse, moving against the flow of the crowd. It felt wrong. Everyone else was running away from the danger, their faces masks of exhaustion and fear, while I rode straight toward it. The refugees I passed gave me numb, hollow stares. Some looked at me with confusion, probably thinking I was a beautiful girl who had finally lost her mind. Why else would I be heading toward the slaughter? I didn't care what they thought. My expression remained cold as I pulled the reins, stopping my horse in front of an old man who was hobbling along with his grandson. "Old man," I called out. He jumped, startled by my voice. When he looked up and saw a young woman on horseback, he relaxed just a fraction. "Yes, young lady. Do you need something?" "How much further to Jincheng?" I asked. Jincheng." He blinked, pointing a trembling finger behind him. "It's not far. Maybe another 10 miles or so." 10 miles. I did the math in my head. I could make it before dark. I didn't say anything else, but the old man couldn't help himself. He looked at me with genuine concern, waving his hands as if trying to push me back. "Young lady, listen to an old man's advice. Don't go to Jincheng. You can't go there." I knew exactly why I shouldn't go, but I needed more details. I feigned confusion. "Oh, why not? Demons. Great demons." He slapped his thigh, his voice shaking. "The villages near Jincheng, they were wiped out in a single night. Not a soul left alive. They say the streets ran red with blood. Everyone has fled. Even the county magistrate abandoned his post and ran away with his family. He looked me up and down, his eyes pitying. A girl as delicate as you, going in there alone? You're just delivering a snack to those monsters. He didn't wait to see if I'd listen. He grabbed his grandson's hand and hurried back into the crowd, desperate to put more distance between himself and the city. I sat there for a moment, feeling a strange sense of unease. The magistrate had fled? That was a massive red flag. According to the laws of the Great Tang, officials were bound to their posts. If a disaster or a demon attack occurred, they were expected to report it and hold the line. Deserting was a capital offense, treated the same as treason. It meant execution for the official and exile, or worse, for his entire family. For a scholar who had studied for decades to earn that position to throw it all away, he must have been terrified. He must have believed that being hunted by the imperial court was a better fate than staying in Jincheng. I hesitated. Was I walking into something I couldn't handle? Before I could decide, two figures appeared at the far end of the road. They were massive, standing a full head taller than any normal man, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the light. My pupils contracted. My hand instinctively dropped to the hilt of my blade. As they got closer, the horror became clear. They weren't human. Their faces were covered in short, coarse black fur. Their snouts protruded forward, and when they spoke, I could see jagged, yellowing tusks. They were pig demons. "Brother, father is being stingy," the one in the lead grumbled, scratching his crotch. "He said he brought us out here to gain experience, but then he went on a rampage and killed everyone himself. We didn't even get to peel a single human hide." The other one snorted in agreement. "Tell me about it. Those two-legged sheep back there are already cold. The blood is curdled. What's the fun in eating that?" He licked his tusks, his eyes scanning the road. "We need to find someone fresh. Eating them while they're still kicking, that's the real joy." They chatted like they were discussing a Sunday stroll, completely ignoring the terrified refugees around them. Then, the lead pig demon's eyes landed on me. The refugees were screaming, scrambling over each other to get away. But I didn't move. I sat on my horse, looking down at them with a gaze of pure, cold contempt. Demons hate that look. They see themselves as the ultimate predators and humans as nothing more than livestock. To be looked at like a common animal by a weak, human girl, it set them off instantly. "You're looking for death," the leader roared. The two massive bodies charged at me like fleshy cannonballs, bringing a foul, stinking wind with them. But the moment they moved, I moved faster. I flipped off my horse, my horizontal blade clearing its scabbard with a sharp, metallic ring. I didn't just use my sword skills. I integrated the footwork from my green cliff shadow technique. In this world, survival meant using every tool available. With my wolf-like speed talent, I was a blur. The pig demons blinked, and I was gone. "Where did she go?" "Behind you," I whispered. The demon froze, the coarse hair on its neck standing on end. Before it could even turn its head, a flash of white steel tore through the air like a tiger's claw. A heavy thud followed. The massive pig had spun into the sky, its face frozen in shock. A fountain of hot, dark demonic blood sprayed several feet into the air. The road went silent. The second pig demon stopped dead, his courage vanishing instantly. He didn't even try to fight. He turned and bolted. He didn't get far. I flicked my wrist, clearing the blood from my blade, and suddenly I was standing right in his path. I pointed the tip of my sword at the ground, a single drop of blood sliding down the edge. "Where are you going?" I asked softly. You. The demon's legs turned to jelly. He couldn't even form a sentence. I looked at him with dead eyes and raised my blade. My dark hair fluttered in the wind, mirrored by the cold gleam of the steel. I must have looked like a demon myself in that moment. "Now," I said, "it's your turn. Spare me, please." The demon collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "My father is a powerful Mingo-level demon. If you kill me, he'll never let you live." I paused, slightly surprised. "Mingo-level, huh?" The pig demon looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He thought I was scared. I wasn't. I brought the blade down, driving it straight through the top of his skull and twisting the handle. His body gave a final, violent jerk before going limp. The refugees stood there, mouths agape, staring at the two monsters that had been terrorizing them only seconds ago. I slowly pulled my blade from the demon's head and wiped the gore on his tattered clothes. The system notifications chimed in my mind. Asterisk killed a Wunshin-level creature. Gained 30 years of cultivation. Asterisk. Asterisk killed a Wunshin-level creature. Gained 30 years of cultivation. Asterisk. I checked my status. 60 more years added to the bank. My total cultivation was now at 180 years. Trash, I muttered, clicking my tongue. These two were so weak, they didn't even trigger a new entry in my records. I sheathed my blade and looked toward the horizon. Jincheng was waiting. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Not long ago, I was the girl trembling in front of a tiger demon. Now, these Wunshin-level monsters were nothing more than stray dogs to me. The old man I'd asked for directions earlier was the first to snap out of the shock. He fell to his knees, babbling about eternal gratitude. Soon, the whole road was a sea of refugees bowing and scraping. It made me uncomfortable. I frowned and waved them off. Just move, I snapped. This place isn't safe. They didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled up and vanished down the road, supporting their elderly and children. I didn't leave immediately. My eyes were fixed on the two massive pig demon corpses. To break through from Wenxian to the Mingu level, I needed massive amounts of resources, or demon flesh. It was the fuel I needed to ignite my blood and push past the limit. I walked over to one of the carcasses and gave the belly a kick with my boot. It was surprisingly springy. Was I supposed to eat this? The thought made me grimace. But I had a rule: never waste a drop of anything useful. I shouted to the retreating crowd. Old man. He turned back, shaking like a leaf. I need a rope. He didn't ask questions. He handed over a hemp cord, bowing low. I tied the rope to the demon's hind legs and hitched the other into my saddle. I climbed onto my horse and gave the reins a snap. Yeah, we set off toward Jincheng, leaving two deep, bloody grooves in the dirt road. The moon hung like a silver hook in the sky. Miles away, a dozen riders were tearing through the dust. They wore the black and red gear of the Zenmosi. Their horses weren't normal. They were red copper steeds with glowing red eyes and breath like steam. The leader, a young man, pulled up and shared a water skin with an older man named Sun Yin. We'll be in Jincheng in 3 days at this rate, the kid said. Sun Yin just scoffed. Speed doesn't matter, he muttered. Demons kill faster than we can ride. The mood turned heavy. They kicked their horses and vanished back into the night. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, my horse was spent. The poor beast was huffing and puffing, its pace slowing to a crawl. Dragging 2 tons of demon meat wasn't easy work. I sighed and hopped down. Sorry, old friend, I said, patting its neck. I untied the corpses and left them by the road. Nearby, I spotted a ruined land temple. The walls were half collapsed, and the statues were toppled, but it was shelter. I dragged my gear inside and sat against a broken wall. The night wind was cold, but I didn't care. I opened the scroll in my mind. 180 years of cultivation. That was a lot of blood and sweat. It was time to spend it. I looked at my 2 main skills, the Tiger Mountain God and the Green-Faced Wolf King. The tiger was my primary strength, raw power and speed. I decided to go all in. I poured every single year of that 180-year bank into the tiger scroll. The number dropped fast. 150, 100, 50, 0. My heart ached at the loss, but then the scroll flared with a blinding crimson light. The tiger on the paper seemed to breathe. A new line of text appeared, Tiger Mountain God, dotting the I's. My head felt like it was going to explode. I gasped for air, sweat pouring down my face. The tiger's eyes on the scroll were now a piercing, bloody red. I had unlocked a new ability, demonization. I could briefly take on the form of the tiger demon at the cost of my own vitality. The warning said it was dangerous, but the power was intoxicating. I held up my right hand. I focused. Suddenly, a wave of heat erupted from my heart. My blood felt like boiling oil. I groaned as my bones creaked and shifted. My muscles tightened, becoming hard as iron without losing their shape. My black hair bled into a fiery, burning red. But the most terrifying change was in my eyes. The world twisted and sharpened. My pupils thinned into vertical slits. My eyes shifted, turning into a pair of cold, ruthless golden pools. A surge of power like I'd never felt before exploded through my limbs. It was intoxicating. I felt like I could punch right through the stone walls of this ruined temple with a single strike. But then, the agony hit. My heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. A void opened up inside me, frantically swallowing my life force. My blood essence was draining at a terrifying speed. I realized instantly that if I didn't stop, I'd be sucked dry in seconds. I'd be a shriveled corpse before I could even take a step. Stop! I screamed internally. The searing heat receded like a tide. My strength vanished, and I collapsed onto the cold floor, gasping for air. My chest heaved as I fought for breath. A strand of hair fell across my face. It was black again. I touched my eyes with trembling fingers, then looked at my palms. That explosive power was gone without a trace. Damn it, I muttered. I didn't even have the energy to swear properly. This move was a double-edged sword. If I couldn't end a fight instantly while using it, I'd be left completely helpless. It was a last resort, nothing more. I struggled to sit up and lean my back against the rough stone wall. Just then, a loud, undignified growl erupted from my stomach. I clutched my gut and sighed. That was the reality of being a martial artist. Every bit of power came from blood essence, and blood essence came from food. That brief demonization had left me completely hollow. I was so hungry I felt like my stomach was sticking to my spine. I pulled out the dried meat Qingqing Yuan had given me and took a bite. It was hard as a rock. I chewed a small piece for a long time, but it tasted like nothing. My eyes drifted toward the temple entrance, landing on the two massive boar demon carcasses lying in the dirt. A pig is still a pig, right? I licked my lips. To hell with it. I was starving to death. I couldn't afford to be picky. I stood up, grabbed my flint and my blade, and walked over to the nearest demon. With a clean flash of steel, I hacked off a thick, meaty hind leg. The smell of blood was overwhelming, but I didn't flinch. Back inside, I started a bonfire. Soon, the skinless leg was sizzling over the flames. Fat dripped into the fire, popping and releasing a strange, heavy aroma. I tore off a scorched chunk of meat. It was hot, but I didn't care. I blew on it twice and shoved it into my mouth. The texture was coarse and the gamey taste was intense, but as the meat hit my stomach, a wave of warmth rose up. It flowed through my body, replenishing my drained essence at a visible rate. My eyes lit up. This wasn't just food, it was a tonic. I didn't hesitate anymore. I began tearing into the boar leg like a man possessed. In that moment, I realized demons were actually quite useful. I've never been a huge fan of pork, but as I ate, the warmth in my gut grew into a surging heat. The hunger vanished, replaced by something else. I went to take another bite, but suddenly froze. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation. Something was wrong. My hunger was gone, and my energy should have been topped off, but the warmth didn't stop. It felt like dozens of small, gentle snakes crawling through my meridians, scrubbing them clean and widening the paths. I snapped my eyes open and stared at the greasy meat in my hand. This wasn't just recovery. Consuming demon flesh could actually raise the ceiling of my cultivation. A wild thought exploded in my mind. I kill demons to gain years of cultivation for my scrolls, and I eat demons to strengthen my physical foundation. This was the perfect cycle. I ignored the foul taste and shoveled the rest of the meat down my throat. If this was the path to power, I'd eat anything. Well, almost anything. I spent the next 3 days in that temple. I didn't leave until those two massive boar demons were nothing but a pile of bones. By the end, my blood felt like a rushing river, pounding against my veins. I could feel myself standing right on the threshold of the next realm. I stood up and stretched, a smirk tugging at my lips. I couldn't help but think about the Wolf King and the tiger god I'd killed earlier. All that high-quality meat, just rotting in the wilderness. What a waste. But I couldn't dwell on it. I had a job to do in Jincheng County, and I'd already delayed 3 days. I patted the dust off my clothes and looked at my horse. All right, buddy, time to clock in. The horse stopped chewing its grass and gave me a look of pure annoyance. I laughed and patted its face. Don't give me that. You've had 3 days of rest. Move it, or you're next on the menu. The horse snorted, but followed me back onto the main road. When we finally reached Jincheng, the city gates were wide open, looking like the mouth of a dead man. A group of riders on black steeds entered just ahead of me. 2 men led the pack. One was middle-aged and steady, named Sun Yin. The other was younger, with a sharp, restless energy. The younger man pulled his reins and waved a hand in front of his nose. The air was thick with an unspeakable stench. "You get used to it," Sun Yin said coldly. The streets were a graveyard. Doors were smashed, and black, dried blood stained every corner. The young man gripped his sword hilt. "Stay sharp. They say this demon calls himself the Black-Robed Sword Immortal. They say his sword intent has reached the Minggu realm." The mention of the Minggu realm made the riders behind them stiffen. "Split up," Sun Yin ordered. "Groups of 3. If you see anything, signal immediately. Don't try to be a hero." The groups dispersed, leaving Sun Yin and the younger man to ride slowly down the main street. "Brother Su, what do these demons even want?" the younger man whispered. "He slaughtered the whole town, but he didn't eat them. Is he just trying to claim the territory?" Sun Yin shook his head. "Don't try to guess the mind of a demon. In the end, they all want the same thing." "What's that?" "A death wish." The younger man fell silent. That was the whole point of the Zenmosi. It didn't matter how powerful or immortal a demon claimed to be. If they brought their madness into the world of men, there was only one path left for them. They turned the corner, and the silence of the dead city swallowed them whole. An old private school stood before me. The door had collapsed. Inside, the scene was a nightmare. A dozen small bodies lay scattered across the floor. Children, no more than 7 or 8 years old. A white-haired teacher had been pinned to the wall, a calligraphy brush driven through his eye socket. Below him, 2 lines of jagged, bloody characters had been smeared onto the stone. The corner of my eye twitched. I leaned in to read the message, but a bone-chilling dragging sound echoed from the end of the street. We all looked up. A massive black silhouette emerged from the swirling dust. It had the body of a man but the head of a pig. Its enormous face was drenched in gore, and its eyes glowed with a feral, crimson light. On its shoulder, it carried a thick wooden stake. A woman in tattered clothes was chained to the top, dangling upside down. She struggled, making muffled, gurgling noises. Her tongue had been cut out. "You animal!" Lu Chen roared. He reached for his blade, but a heavy hand clamped down on his hilt. Sun Yin shook his head. He kept his eyes locked on the beast. He sat tall on his horse, his voice eerily calm. "The Black-Robed Sword Immortal, I presume?" The pig demon didn't deny it. It grinned, revealing a mouthful of jagged tusks. "I came looking for my sons. I caught a scent and decided to see what was inside." Its bloody eyes scanned the 3 of us, finally settling on Sun Yin. "I didn't expect to find the Zenmosi." Lu Chen looked confused. "Sons? This monster has sons." Sun Yin's expression didn't flicker. "I don't know anything about your sons. I don't care about them either." He paused, his tone turning ice cold. "Let her go now, and I'll make your death quick." The pig demon's gaze turned frigid. It didn't need to hear more. If the Zenmosi were here, its 2 useless sons were likely already dead. A wave of murderous intent exploded from its body. The sound of a tiger's roar and the crack of thunder shook the long street. Sand and dust swirled in the wind. A young woman dressed as a common traveler appeared at the edge of the official road. Her skin was as pale as jade, looking completely out of place in this desolate, yellow wasteland. I, Jiang Yuechu, frowned as I urged my horse into Jincheng County. I knew this world wasn't as prosperous as my old one, but this place was a ghost town. The streets were empty. Shop doors hung open, banging in the wind. If the sign at the gate hadn't said Jincheng, I would have thought I was lost. Had the demon already left? Just as the thought crossed my mind, a furious shout and the clash of steel erupted from deep within the city. My pupils shrank. I vaulted off my horse, tied it to a nearby post, and gripped my sword hilt. I moved toward the sound, silent as a shadow. A blade hummed like a dragon's cry. Sun Yin didn't waste another word. He leapt from his horse, his heavy blade tracing a lethal arc through the dim light. He flooded the steel with his inner vitality. The pig demon sneered. It reached behind its back and pulled out a delicate, rusted longsword. Die! Blade met sword. Clang! Sparks flew. A second later, the rusted sword snapped. Half the blade whistled through the air and embedded itself in a distant wall. Sun Yin landed, his blade pointed at the ground, his body as steady as a mountain. Good. Lord Su is invincible. A few Zenmosi officers arrived just in time to see the strike. Their spirits soared. Was this the power of a Mingu realm master? Ordinary demons couldn't even stand against a single blow. But Sun Yin wasn't smiling. He raised a hand to stop them from advancing. Stay back. The excitement vanished from their faces. This thing isn't a normal Mingu demon, Sun Yin hissed. Lu Chun, take the men and retreat. Report to the great general in Liangzhou. The demon in Jincheng is beyond our level. You think you can just leave? The pig demon let out a hideous laugh. Its eyes were full of mockery. Do you think I, Zhu Yan, am some pushover? He tossed the broken hilt aside. Then, his fat began to ripple and surge in a sickening way. His already massive body swelled, tearing through his ragged clothes. A thick, foul-smelling red mist began to seep from his pores. The air grew heavy with the scent of rot. Lu Chun and the others finally understood why Sun Yin had ordered a retreat. This was a divine talent. When a demon enters the Mingu realm, they have a slim chance of awakening an innate supernatural ability. Most demons are just thick-skinned beasts, but 1 in 10,000 is different. Either they carry the bloodline of an ancient great demon, or they've stumbled upon a massive stroke of luck. This red mist was one of those rare, twisted talents. Zhu Yin looked at the terrified guards and laughed at himself. I tried to be like a human. I carried a sword. I recited poetry. I almost forgot that my kind was born to tear flesh with claws and crush bone with tusks. His eyes turned on the group. First, you are dogs of the Zenmosi. That is a crime. Second, you kill my children. For these 2 sins, you all die today. The red mist surged. It coalesced into dozens of thick, bloody tentacles that lashed out like whips. One officer couldn't move fast enough. The tentacles wrapped around his limbs and yanked him into the air. He struggled, his sword clattering to the ground, but he couldn't even scream before the demon's jaws clamped down. Crunch, his head was gone. Blood sprayed everywhere. No, Lu Chun roared. He swung his blade, hacking through the tentacles, but they regrew instantly. They were endless. Damn it, Sun Yin cursed. His blood boiled. His bones began to hum with the sound of clashing metal, the true sign of the Mingu realm. He stepped forward, his blade igniting with a faint golden flame. Suppression blade. He swung. The golden light cut through the air like a silk ribbon. This was a secret technique of the Zenmosi, designed specifically to slaughter demons. It was brutal and pure. The golden light sliced through dozens of tentacles, and the wounds hissed like hot oil on snow. Black smoke rose, and for a moment, they didn't grow back. But it wasn't enough. There were too many. While Sun Yin struggled, the officers behind him, men of lower cultivation, were defenseless. In an instant, 2 more were snatched up. Zhu Yin grinned, chewing their heads with a sickening crack crunch, his face smeared with gore. Did you think of this when you killed my sons? Sun Yin's face was ashen. He didn't speak. He just pushed his vitality to the limit, his blade glowing brighter as he tried to protect his remaining men. But he was only one man. The blood mist was infinite. A demon's supernatural powers don't follow the rules of logic. But that's exactly why those rare creatures who possess them are so terrifying. Old Kai fought with everything he had. He managed to hack through 1 blood-red tentacle, but 5 more swiped through his guard. They wrapped around him like pythons, yanking him off the ground. He was pulled toward the demon's gaping maw. Foul, stinking saliva dripped onto his face, mixing with the blood of his fallen comrades. He looked into those jagged teeth and saw only death. It was over. Suddenly, the pig demon froze. The tentacles tightened for a second, then went limp. Old Kai hit the dirt hard, the air driven from his lungs. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, gasping for air. Ignoring the pain, he looked up. The demon wasn't looking at him anymore. Its crimson eyes were locked on something behind the group. I stood at the far end of the long street. The wind caught my hair, revealing my face. To anyone else, I looked like a young girl, as delicate as a spring peach or an autumn flower. The men were stunned. Why was a girl standing in the middle of this nightmare? I didn't give them time to wonder. I drew my blade. A massive, blood-colored tiger phantom erupted behind me, its roar shaking the very foundations of the street. Old Kai had practiced martial arts since he was 5. He'd endured 20 years of brutal training and thought he was a top-tier warrior when the Zenmosi recruited him. But facing this blood-mist power, he realized he was just a frog at the bottom of a well. He watched me, a girl who looked years younger than him, standing alone against a high-level demon. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How did I have the courage? Sun Yin, still struggling to stand, was just as shocked. But he wasn't looking at my face. He was staring at the official blade hanging from my waist. The pig demon, Zhu Yin, stared me down. His previous arrogance vanished. He scanned me from head to toe, searching for something familiar. Then, his eyes widened with realization. "It's you," he hissed. "You're the one who killed my sons." I didn't test the waters. I didn't say a word. I just raised my blade. The tiger phantom behind me roared again as I flooded my weapon with every drop of my vitality. Tiger slaying blade, supreme realm. I lunged, my blade flashing like a streak of lightning, a heavy, murderous strike aimed straight for Zhu Yan's neck. Sensing death, the demon retracted his tentacles, weaving them into a thick, pulsating shield of meat and mist in front of him. Crashed, the collision sounding like a dull, grinding thud. My blade felt like it was sinking into thick glue. Usually, this strike would split solid rock in two, but these tentacles were different. A massive counterforce jolted up my arms. My feet skidded across the ground as I was forced back several paces. I frowned, my palms feeling numb. This was the first time I'd encountered a technique this bizarre. From the moment I saw this pig, I knew he was the father of those 2 idiots I'd killed earlier. I didn't know if demons had a way of tracking their kin, but I couldn't afford to be hunted by a vengeful father while the government was already looking for me. The blood mist cleared, revealing Zhu Yan. He hadn't taken a scratch. "So this is how you killed my boys," he growled. I raised my blade a few inches higher. Silence was my only answer. "Good. Very good," Zhu Yan screamed. His bloated body began to swell. Beneath his skin, it looked like thousands of maggots were writhing. The tentacles around him grew at an impossible speed, filling the street like a nest of giant, wriggling snakes. The surviving officers turned pale. They were nothing but snacks to a monster like this. But then, Sun Yin gritted his teeth. He shoved the injured Old Kai aside and charged forward. "Lord Su," Old Kai screamed. Sun Yin didn't look back. He was an officer of the Zenmosi. He couldn't let a civilian girl fight a demon alone while he watched from the sidelines. He burned his vitality to the limit, his bones humming like a bronze bell. "Die," he roared. He put everything into one final strike, a golden arc of light meant to break the stalemate. He knew if he failed, he was dead. He just hoped the girl and Old Kai would be smart enough to run while the demon was distracted. Zhu Yan laughed. He swiped a dozen tentacles out like a net, catching the golden blade midair. Clang! The demon didn't even flinch. He raised a massive, tree-trunk leg and kicked. Thud! Sun Yin flew backward like he'd been hit by a battering ram. But that split second was all the opening I needed. I moved. I was a blur of motion, a shadow streaking across the cobblestones. I planted my foot and vaulted into the air. I gripped my hilt with both hands and brought the blade down with the weight of a mountain. Die! The strike was perfect. Zhu Yan didn't expect me to be that fast. He barely managed to jerk his head to the side. Squelch! Blood sprayed as dozens of tentacles were severed instantly. My blade didn't stop. It buried itself deep into the thick fat of his neck. Zhu Yan let out a world-shaking roar of agony. But I wasn't smiling. The blade was stuck. The muscles in his neck clamped down on the steel like a vice, stopping my strike cold. Infuriated by the pain, the demon ignored the wound. He swung a massive fist toward my face with the force of a falling gale. My pupils constricted. I couldn't pull the sword out in time. I let go with one hand, slammed my palm against the pommel to keep it wedged in, and kicked off his disgusting face. Bam! I flipped backward through the air and landed on my feet. I stared at the pig demon, my sword still sticking out of his neck. He was still standing. He was still hungry. Damn it, I thought. This thing wasn't just weird, it was a tank. I'd given it everything I had, and it was only getting angrier. I couldn't even sever her neck. The blade was stuck deep, and the demon was still very much alive. Beside me, Lu Chun was crawling through the dirt, gasping through the agony of his own shattered ribs. He reached Sun Yan's side. Sun Yan looked terrible. There was a bloody, jagged hole in his chest. His breathing was shallow, coming out in wet, metallic rasps. Every time he exhaled, bloody foam bubbled from his lips. Sun Yan forced his eyes open, looking at the frenzied pig demon. "Retreat," he wheezed. "Take the brothers and get out of here." I saw Lu Chen's face crumble. A wave of helplessness washed over him. He slammed his fist into the ground, screaming at the sky in pure, bitter frustration. He wanted to be stronger. He wanted to help. But his knees gave out, and he collapsed, sobbing. I didn't have the luxury of crying. I forced myself to stand up. I spat out a mouthful of hot, copper-tasting blood and straightened my spine. The surviving Zenmosi officers watched me, their eyes wide with terror. They saw something impossible. A spectral tiger claw appeared out of thin air, its phantom fingers interlocking with mine. The wind howled down the long street of Liangzhou. The claw didn't just touch me. It began to merge into my flesh. My muscles surged and rippled. Fine, crimson tiger stripes crawled up from my wrists, snaking all the way to my shoulders. My black hair bled into a deep, visceral red starting from the roots. My pupils narrowed into golden, vertical slits. A violent, predatory aura exploded from my body, ancient and terrifying. The pig demon froze. For the first time, I saw genuine confusion in its eyes. It felt something familiar coming from me, the sin of its own kind. "You, what the hell are you?" the demon stammered. I didn't answer. I knew my blood and essence couldn't sustain this form for long. I had seconds. I had to end this now. Boom. The cobblestones beneath my feet shattered like glass as I lunged. I was a streak of crimson light, tearing through the air. I was too fast for them to track. The demon, the officers, all they saw was a blur. I pulled my fist back, no fancy techniques, just raw, concentrated killing intent. "The thing that's going to kill you," I whispered. My voice sounded like it was right against the demon's ear. Bang! My fist slammed into the demon's massive gut. The layers of fat rippled like a disturbed pond. The pig demon's face twisted. It realized too late that it was outmatched. "Spare me," it shrieked. It sounded exactly like its son. My response was another punch. The air hissed as my arm broke the sound barrier. This time, there was no resistance. My fist tore through the skin, crushed the bone, and punched a hole straight through the demon's chest. I stood there for a few seconds. The massive body swayed, then toppled backward like a felled oak. Thud! Dust swirled around the long street. Lu Chen stared at me, his mouth hanging open. The other survivors looked like they'd seen a god, or a monster. A demon that had nearly wiped them all out. A demon that had crippled a high-ranking officer like Sun Yan was just dead. The suffocating aura faded. The red stripes receded under my skin, and my hair returned to its natural black. My strength vanished instantly. I collapsed to one knee, gasping for air, my lungs burning. A prompt flickered in my mind. Killed bone-refining realm creature. Gained 350 years of cultivation. New demon detected. Spend cultivation to record? I didn't have the energy to choose. Pain and exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. I looked up and saw the suspicious, fearful gazes of the Zenmosi officers. Then, everything went black. I woke up to a strange ceiling. The air smelled of bitter herbs and old wood. I blinked, my mind racing. Wait, did I transmigrate again? I checked my internal status. Host, Jiang Yuechu. Realm, perfect foundation. Okay, the system was still there. I was still me. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The door creaked open. A woman in a white dress walked in, carrying a steaming bowl of medicine. She stopped when she saw my eyes open. "You're awake," she said, her voice soft. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like lead. I couldn't move a muscle. "Who are you?" She set the bowl down and hurried over, propping a soft pillow behind my back. "Don't push yourself," she smiled. "I'm Wei Qing. You're in Liangzhou City." "Liangzhou?" My heart skipped a beat. "How did I end up here?" "The Zenmosi brought you back," she explained, sensing my confusion. She blew on a spoonful of medicine and held it to my lips. "Your essence was completely drained. You've been unconscious for 5 days. If you didn't have such a strong constitution, you'd be dead by now." I remembered the tiger power. I remembered the pig demon. Then nothing. I looked at the woman, then at the room. At least the Zenmosi had a conscience and didn't leave me for the dogs. But then a terrifying thought hit me. Asterisk the Zenmosi. If they brought me here, did they see what I became? Is my secret out? Asterisk. I was a husky that had just walked straight into a den of wolves. I heard them talking in the next room. Their voices were low, but in the silence of the infirmary, every word cut through the air like a blade. They say a mountain came to life, a man with a short beard said, his voice trembling with a hint of the absurd. It grew legs and just ran away. Another man scoffed. A mountain with legs? Maybe the sandstorm was just too thick. You probably couldn't see straight. Enough! A calm, flat voice interrupted. It was Wei He, the commander. What else? The bearded man cleared his throat. The black river near Zhanye flowed backward for 3 days. It's choked with dead fish. The stench carries for 100 miles. The room went silent. In a world crawling with demons, strange occurrences were common, but the frequency was becoming alarming. Finally, someone shifted the conversation to the topic everyone was actually thinking about. What about Captain Su Xiaowei? The silence deepened. Su Xiaowei was a Minggu realm martial artist. In a place like Longyu, he was a powerhouse. Yet, a few days ago, he had been carried back on a stretcher, barely clinging to life. He won't die, Wei He said, finally looking up. His face was a mask of indifference. But his meridians are shattered. His blood essence is depleted. Even if he recovers, his cultivation is gone. He's a cripple. A collective gasp filled the hall. A Mingo master, ruined just like that. Was the demon truly that terrifying? The bearded man sighed. Demons with supernatural abilities are a nightmare. Years ago, a single demon in Hushi used illusions to slaughter 15 of our captains and 300 brothers. This pig demon in Jinsheng could manipulate blood. It's a power we've never even heard of. Su Xiaowei didn't lose because he was weak. He paused, and I felt the weight of several gazes shifting toward the corner of the room. Lu Chen was standing there. He had been part of that bloody battle and was still pale, his body swaying slightly from his injuries. Lu Chen, Wei He called out. A woman came back with you. Lu Chen straightened up instantly, bowing low. Yes, great general. Tell me again, Wei He commanded. How exactly did that pig demon die? Lu Chen took a deep breath. I could hear the lingering terror in his voice. I don't know what kind of technique it was, General. The woman's blade was like a tiger. A blood-colored phantom followed her every move. Her style was incredibly fierce, but even then, she only managed to wound the demon. He swallowed hard, struggling to find the words. But then, red tiger markings appeared on her skin. Her black hair turned blood red. Her eyes, they became vertical slits, like a predator's. The killing intent coming off her was more terrifying than the demon itself. With one punch, just one, she tore a hole straight through the pig demon's chest. The hall erupted in hushed, frantic whispers. Unheard of. What kind of evil art is that? Could she be a demon in disguise? If she had that kind of power, why wait until Su Xiaowei was dying to use it? Lu Chen opened his mouth to defend me, but he hesitated. He had felt that murderous aura too. But he also knew that during the journey back to Liangzhou, I had shown no demonic energy. My blood was human, even if my power wasn't. Enough. Wei He's voice cracked like a whip. The room went dead silent. The investigation into Jinsheng ends now. Recall all personnel immediately. General, someone protested. Her identity hasn't been confirmed. Wei He waved a hand dismissively. I have made my decision. Leave us. One by one, they filed out, leaving Wei He alone with his thoughts as he stared at the tactical map on the table. The Jiang family. He whispered. This is going to be troublesome. Back in the infirmary, I winced as a spoonful of medicine hit my tongue. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever tasted. Bitter medicine is good for you, Wei Qing said with a soft laugh. She wiped my chin with a silk handkerchief. This is brewed from blood ginseng and 100-year-old Huangjing. Your essence was drained. Normal food wouldn't touch the damage. My heart sank. Blood ginseng? That sounded expensive. Why was the Zenmosi being so generous to a random girl they found in the woods? I looked at Wei Qing. She was about 23, dressed in a simple white gown, smelling faintly of herbs. Miss Wei, I said, trying to sound casual. Where exactly am I? She blinked and smiled. The back courtyard of the Zenmosi headquarters, of course. I nearly choked. I was a fugitive who had killed a Zenmosi officer to survive, and now I was resting in their lion's den. If they found out who I was, they wouldn't be feeding me medicine. They'd be making a rug out of me. Thank you for telling me, I said, forcing a smile. Where are the men who saved me? I should thank them. They are on duty, she replied. Don't worry about it. My brother told me to take good care of you. Your brother? I asked. Before she could answer, the door creaked open. A middle-aged man in black robes walked in. He wasn't massive, but he carried an aura of absolute authority. Wei Qing stood and bowed. Brother. Wei didn't look at his sister. His eyes locked onto mine. I felt like I was being dissected. He didn't say a word, just stared until my skin began to crawl. Daughter of Jiang's son, he said slowly. Jiang Yuechu. I froze. My mind went into a frantic spiral. Asterisk crap. 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 Asterisk. I thought about running, but I couldn't even sit up. I thought about killing him, but this man felt more dangerous than the pig demon ever did. I thought about playing dumb, but that seemed useless. I took a breath and looked him in the eye. My predecessor was a prisoner being escorted by the Zenmosi. My name, my history, my face, it was all in their records. As long as I stayed in this world, this confrontation was inevitable. Strangely, I felt a sense of relief. The secret was out. The hiding was over. I didn't say anything. I just stared back at him. Wei's eyes flickered with a hint of surprise at my silence. Beside him, Wei Qing looked back and forth between us, sensing the sudden, heavy tension in the room. Wei Qing looked back and forth between us, her face a mask of pure confusion. Brother? You two know each other. Wei shook his head slowly. Not exactly. Qing'er, leave us. Wei Qing hesitated, her mind clearly racing. She knew her brother's temperament better than anyone. Wei was a man defined by duty and his blade. He was cold, concise, and rarely smiled. Even the dogs in the manor steered clear of him because of the thick, murderous aura he carried. But from the moment he ordered her to personally look after me, she knew something was wrong. He hadn't just asked her to care for me. He had opened the private treasury. He'd used the good stuff, blood ginseng, gold leaf, the kind of rare medicine even high-ranking officers couldn't get their hands on after a critical injury. Now, he was pouring it all into a girl with no name and no background. She probably wondered if I was some secret lover her brother had picked up on the road, then immediately dismissed the thought. This man was a block of wood. He didn't know the first thing about romance. Still, she bowed obediently and retreated, clicking the door shut behind her. The room fell into a heavy silence. Wei didn't speak, so I didn't either. I just waited. Finally, he broke the quiet. Half a month ago, Pei Changqing led a team of Zenmosi guards out of Liangzhou. Since then, there has been nothing. No reports. No contact. They are likely dead. And yet, you are the only one who survived. He laid it all out. There was no point in lying or making excuses anymore. I looked him straight in the eye. What do you want? To my surprise, Wei actually laughed. What do I want? Jiang Yuechu, you are a fugitive. You were supposed to be exiled to the border. Escaping is an additional crime. Not to mention, you're a prime suspect in the murder of Zenmosi officers. By law, I should have your head. He paused, his tone shifting. However, you killed a manga-level demon. You saved Su Nian, Lu Feng, and 5 other guards. That is a massive achievement. He tapped his fingers against his knee. Your merit cancels out your crime. Your life is safe. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him, my heart pounding. I didn't believe in charity. The Zenmosi wouldn't just let a fugitive go because she did them a favor, especially one who might have killed their own. Wei finally got to the point. That strange power you have, where did it come from? I'm curious. But, he stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to me. I can also choose not to care. He looked out at the courtyard. You have 2 choices. First, I send you back to the capital under guard. Your strange abilities and the death of Pei Changqing will be handed over to the Ministry of Justice and the Imperial Guard. They will dig into every corner of your life until everything is clear. Don't worry, nobody dares to torture a Zenmosi prisoner. My heart sank. Back to the capital? My father's case was a hornet's nest of conspiracies. Right now, I was barely at the peak of the Wenxian realm. If I went back there, I was a dead woman walking. And the second choice? I asked. Wei turned around. Simple. The Zenmosi doesn't care about your past or where you came from. We only care about your skills. Join us. From now on, your past is wiped clean. No one will pursue you for the Jiang family case. You hunt demons for us, and we provide you protection. What do you say? I almost had to stop myself from laughing. Was this even a choice? As a fugitive with no papers, I couldn't even walk down the street without being hunted in this demon-infested world. Joining the Zenmosi didn't just fix my legal status. It gave me a license to kill demons and level up my power. Wei saw my strange expression and probably thought I was scared. It made sense to him. Most warriors avoided the Zenmosi like the plague. It didn't matter how high the pay was. You were spending your life licking blood off a blade. Most people would rather be a bodyguard for a rich family or join the regular army. He was probably ready to give me a whole speech, the stick and the carrot. He'd threaten me with the capital again, then tempt me with gold, secret manuals, and divine weapons. He might have even planned to leak some info about my father's case to hook me in. But before he could start his pitch, I spoke. Fine. Wei blinked, caught off guard by how fast I'd agreed. What did you say? I choose to join the Zenmosi, I repeated calmly. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Very well. From today on, you are a Zenmosi guard of the Lanyu Prefecture. Rank 9, the lowest rank. Your monthly salary is 2 taels of silver, 3 stones of rice, and 10 pounds of meat. You'll be issued a standard-issue horizontal blade made of black iron, 2 sets of uniforms, and an official waist token. If you're injured, we pay for it. If you die, we bury you with honors. If you have family, they get a free education in our academy. He paused, seemingly feeling the need to explain himself. Normally, someone who kills a Mingu demon could start at rank 8. But even I started at the bottom and worked my way up. The men won't respect someone who skips the line. Do you understand? I didn't care about the rank. Rank 9 was still an official position. In this world, a rank 7 magistrate was like a local god. Going from a death row fugitive to a government official was a massive win. Plus, 2 taels of silver was enough to support a family of 5 in the capital for a month. Thank you for the guidance, sir, I said. Wei nodded, looking satisfied. Your internal energy is depleted. The medicine is keeping you alive, but your foundation is damaged. It will take time to recover. Rest here for a few days. Once you're healed, I'll have someone set you up in your new role. Thank you. Don't thank me. You work for us now, he said. He stayed silent for a moment, his eyes darkening. Your father's case. Jiang Sun, it's deep. It's not just court politics. It's an abyss. With your current strength, trying to investigate it is like a mantis trying to stop a carriage. You'll be crushed. Sharpen your tools before you try to cut a tree that big. Understand. I lowered my eyes, my lashes hiding the fire in my gaze. I gave him a small, obedient nod. I will remember your words, sir. Basically, he was telling me, your dad's case is too big, and you're too weak. Don't go looking for a death sentence. I got it. I just needed time. Wei didn't say another word. He turned on his heel and walked out of the room. Wei stopped at the doorway and paused for a second. Without looking back, he mentioned that Pei Chongqing's ancestral home was in Guangwu. He said it was only right for a man to return to his roots. I lay there on the bed, processing his words. I understood exactly what he was implying. The Zenmosi wasn't stupid. Investigating the real cause of death for Pei Chongqing and his men would be child's play for them. But by saying this, Wei was closing the case. The immediate crisis was over. I had a new identity, a powerful backer, and a legitimate reason to hunt demons. With a single thought, I opened the ancient scroll in my mind. The parchment unfurled in my consciousness. My name, Zhang Yuechu, sat at the top. My realm had reached the peak of the Wenxian stage. Under my martial arts, Tiger-Slaying Blade and Green Cliff Reflection were both listed as supreme. But there was something new, Bloodstone Palace. It was marked as complete. I looked at my cultivation bank. 120 years of Dao power remained. I scanned the list of recorded demons, the Tiger Mountain God, the Green-Faced Wolf King, and the Zhu Yan. My talents were listed too: Silver Law Heavenly Beast, Tiger's Baleful Lungs, Wolf's 1,000-mile form, and Demon Transformation. Killing that high-level pig demon had given me 350 years of Dao power. But recording its shadow had cost me 230 years. The price was steep, almost ridiculous. My eyes drifted back to the martial arts section. Bloodstone Palace? What was that? I focused on the text, and small annotations began to appear beneath it. Bloodstone Palace. Status: complete. Effect: by consuming the flesh of demons, the user can drastically increase refinement efficiency, converting it into pure vital energy to strengthen their foundation. This technique has no rank. It is a bloodline talent of the Zhu Yan tribe, granted because I recorded the demon. I froze for a second, then it clicked. No wonder. Back outside Jinsheng County, after I killed those 2 pig demons, I had roasted and eaten their meat. Demon flesh is incredibly nourishing for martial artists, but without a specific technique to refine it, most of the energy is wasted or stays dormant in the body. When I ate those pigs, I felt a boost, but most of the essence had slipped away. Now that I had this technique, it acted like an instinct. It had scoured my body, found all that unrefined essence I'd stored up, and converted it into pure qi. That's how I'd broken through to the peak of my current realm so quickly. I felt a surge of genuine joy. Everyone else lived in fear of demons, but I was becoming more dependent on them by the second. This Bloodstone Palace technique didn't help me in a direct fight, but it was more valuable than any combat skill. As long as I had demons to kill and eat, my path to the next stage, the drum-beating realm and beyond, was wide open. I lay back on the bed and couldn't help it. I started laughing out loud. The door creaked open. Wei Qing walked in carrying a steaming bowl of porridge. She stopped dead when she saw me lying there, laughing like a lunatic. "What are you smiling about?" she asked, looking confused. I wiped the grin off my face and tried to look serious. "Nothing. I'm just overwhelmed with joy at the thought of serving the Zenmosi." Wei Qing gave me a look that said she didn't believe a word of it. She set the bowl down on the small table by the bed. "Sure you are. Just drink this. It's freshly made. I added deer antler and wolfberry to help your blood recovery." I sat up and took the bowl. The aroma was incredible, and my stomach growled instantly. "Oh, and my brother told me to give you these," she said. She pulled out a neatly folded set of clothes and a wooden plaque the size of my palm. The clothes were the iconic black and red embroidered uniform of the Zenmosi. The fabric felt high quality, much better than the one I'd stripped off that dead man earlier. Then I picked up the wooden plaque. It was heavy, carved from a dense, dark wood. One side had the words Zhenma carved in bold, flowing strokes. The other side bore my name, Jiang Yuechu. "This is your waist token," Wei Qing explained. "Within the borders of the Great Tang, this exempts you from all inspections. You can enter and leave any city freely. I picked the clothes based on your size. Try them on later to see if they fit." I gripped the token tightly. My heart felt heavy with a mix of emotions. I had gone through so much, living in fear, fighting for my life, tasting blood on my blade, just to get to this point. Now that the token was actually in my hand, it felt surreal. I wasn't a fugitive anymore. I was the law.